It was not as if this was my very first crucifixion. In fact, it was not as if I hadn't seen a man die before. I had seen many men die, and many of them were at my very own hands, or at the end of my spear, or with a slash of my sword. You don't get to be a centurion in the Roman army without a lot of death. And being stationed here in Jerusalem, especially during the Passover festival, meant that you were on a high security detail, and that there would invariably be some crucifixions. Now, when the locals, they get all excited about a story of being liberated from an ancient empire, then the present empire needs to keep a lid on things. And there is nothing better than a few public crucifixions to cool off some revolutionary hotheads. So there was nothing surprising about this disturbance around the man they called Jesus of Nazareth. We'd heard all about Jesus. We knew about the crowds that enthusiastically accompanied him into the city on the first day of this week. In fact, I was marching into the city myself with a fresh cohort on that very same day. I remember it well. And it was our job to keep the tabs on the population, so we had even heard about his disruption in the temple that he caused when he turned over the tables. But really, as long as the natives are squabbling amongst themselves, so much the better for us. I mean, who cares about their interreligious feuds? Sadducees, Pharisees, scribes, priests, I can't really tell them apart. The only ones that we worry about are the revolutionaries, the bandits, and the insurrectionists. You know, guys like Barabbas. Now, this Barabbas fellow clearly did not submit to Caesar. No, he belonged to something else, someone else, and he was prepared to kill and to die for his cause. And I was just as prepared to grant him his ill-founded martyr death wish. So when I heard that he was in the garrison cells, I relished at the thought of putting that murder on a cross and watching him die. But it wasn't meant to be. For some reason, when the governor, in a show of mercy and largesse of the empire, asked the crowd who they would like to set free for the festival, they all shouted, "Barabbas! Barabbas!" And not for Jesus. So much for their loud hosannas that rang out just a couple of days ago. So much for their messianic enthusiasm for Jesus. When it came right down to it, these folks knew that Jesus wasn't going to bring any kingdom because he refused to take us on with might and arms. Yes, their enthusiasm for Jesus quickly waned when they were offered the revolutionary services of a real man like Barabbas. And so, Hosanna became crucify him. Crucify him! No wonder they can't ever amount much of an opposition against us. They don't even know what they want. They can't even make up their minds about their own revolution. Well, we'll get Barabbas another day, but today it's time for Jesus. Just another crucifixion, really. Or that's what I thought. First, the governor had Jesus beaten with the cat of nine tails. That kind of whipping is pretty standard. Basically, you whip the man until you can see his bones through his flesh. When we were done with that, we sent him into the courtyard where the boys could have some fun. And since they were all getting a little bored, the whole courthouse came out for the show. Almost 500 of them laughing and jeering, beating, getting their kicks in, spitting on him, dressing him up like a king, putting a crown of thorns on his head. I must say it was quite the spectacle. And while I wouldn't have admitted it then, maybe I wasn't quite conscious of it at the time. I think that it was during this ritualized brutality, this beating that really I had come to be numb to because I had seen it so many times. It was while this was going on that I started to be taken by this man. Now, I know it's crazy. He's just another prisoner, just another possible threat to the empire who must be eradicated, just another Jew, another Messiah, another pretentious rabbi with aspirations to royalty. But maybe it was as the lads were mocking him, raising their hands in cruel salute, "Hail, King of the Jews," that he started to kind of look like a king. Now, like I said, that's crazy, but how does a guy near dead from his flogging, a man who has refused to say a word, who had not tried to defend himself, who has not cursed his torturers, look anything but like a broken, dejected political prisoner? I mean, if he was king, then his kingdom had come crashing down in the last few hours. This cohort of Roman soldiers all around him has made sure of that. And our sheer power of life and death over this man should establish once and for all who is the real king around here, who the real father is, and whose kingdom is preeminent. Caesar's. So when we took him to the execution hill, I was the centurion on duty. I was in charge. This was my crucifixion. Jesus and the other two. Now, my respect for that man, what little I had at this point, increased when he rejected the wine that was mixed with the myrrh. No pain-numbing sedative for this Galilean. But as the day progressed, something happened. Maybe it was the way that he received the taunting and the mocking of his own people, including his own religious authorities. Again, no cursing, no condemning, and no defense. Maybe it was that eerie darkness that came over the land. I mean, it was almost as if the sun refused to shine. It was almost as if the very forces of nature were mourning the death of this man. Maybe it was the sign above his head that read, King of the Jews. It was a charge against him. And if he was a king of these Jews, then he had every reason to be on that cross. There can only be one king, and his throne is in Rome. But as I looked at that dying man with those words above his head, I don't know, but the more I looked at him, the more I looked at those words, King of the Jews. The more I began to wonder whether it was true. The more I began to wonder whether he really is the King of the Jews. But if that was actually true, then all the more reason to crucify him. So why was I feeling this uneasiness about it all? I mean, after all, I was just doing my duty. What was it about this man? What was it about his crucifixion, this death, that was having such an impact on me? I don't know, but after he cried out what sounded like a lamentful prayer of, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And then when he cried out something that sounded like, it is finished. And then he breathed his last breath. Well, there was something about that last breath, maybe in combination with everything else that this man had been through, the way he had received the horrors of that day. There was something about that last breath. The way that last breath left him. The way in which he gave up that last breath. The way in which he surrendered to his death. That made me see that there was something going on here. Something that was much bigger than the death of one man. There was something about his death that seemed to have a power and a meaning beyond just one man dying on a cross. And without really thinking about what I was saying, I said, truly, this man was the Son of God. And as soon as the words left my mouth, I realized that this here, on this hill, in front of this cross, bearing witness to this man's death, I had seen God's Son.